I'm Delta Force. You think you can teach me anything?" The words, saturated with the easy arrogance of a man who had never been seriously challenged, echoed off the sterile, white-painted cinder block walls of the combatives' training facility. The crowd, a mix of 30 hardened soldiers from various elite units, Rangers in their multicam, Marines with their sharp digital pattern uniforms, Air Force pararescuemen looking wiry and tough, laughed. It was a nervous, complicit sound, the laughter of men who knew their place in the rigid hierarchy of the warrior class and recognized the man speaking as someone near the top. They were here for a mandatory joint service CQC refresher, and Staff Sergeant Marcus Thorne, a man whose physique seemed chiseled from granite and whose arms were a tapestry of unit insignias and tribal tattoos, was the alpha of this particular ecosystem. He was the gatekeeper. The crowd laughed, but the target of his scorn, a woman standing quietly by the edge of the bloom mats, did not. She just stood there, her gaze unwavering, her expression as placid as a deep, cold lake. She was Sergeant Eva Rostova, and her presence was an anomaly Thorne couldn't tolerate. Her uniform was standard issue, faded from countless washes but immaculately kept. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, functional bun, not a single strand out of place. She was slender, almost slight, and could have easily been mistaken for a fresh-faced intelligence analyst or a logistics officer, not someone meant to share the same rarefied air as these Tier 2 operators. But when Colonel James Sterling, the base's deputy commander for operations, observing from the elevated glass-walled gallery, saw the way she positioned her feet as Thorne approached her, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, her weight settling low, her lead foot angled just so, a flicker of recognition, a ghost of a memory from a long-forgotten briefing in a windowless room, sparked in his mind. He leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration, the casual observation suddenly turning into a sharp, focused analysis. He had seen that stance before, but not on a training mat. He'd seen it in grainy drone footage from a mud-walled compound in a country that didn't officially exist on any deployment map. If you believe true strength doesn't need to announce itself, type silence below. The air in the training hall was thick with the smells of discipline and exertion, the faint tang of antiseptic cleaner, the rubbery scent of the mats, the sharp, metallic odor of sweat. Staff Sergeant Thorne thrived in this environment. It was his cathedral. He paced before the assembled trainees, his voice a low growl that commanded attention. "Listen up. This is not your basic combatives course. We are not here to learn how to win a bar fight. We are here to refine the tools that keep you alive when your rifle runs dry, when you're grappling for control in a shoebox-sized room in some hellhole halfway around the world." He paused, letting his words sink in, his eyes scanning the faces of the men. They were all hard cases, veterans of multiple combat tours, but in his presence they were students. His gaze then fell upon Sergeant Rostova, who was making a quiet notation on a small, ruggedized datapad. She was an observer sent from the asymmetric warfare group to evaluate the training curriculum for potential integration into a new program. To Thorne, her title was just bureaucratic jargon. He saw a pen pusher, a box checker, an outsider. He saw her small stature and quiet demeanor not as signs of discipline, but as proof of her inadequacy. He decided, in a flash of ego-driven impulse, that she would be his object lesson. "You," he barked, pointing a thick finger at her. "Sergeant, what's your name?" Rostova looked up, her eyes calm. "Rostova, Staff Sergeant Rostova," he repeated, tasting the name with theatrical disdain. "AWG, right? Asymmetric warfare. Sounds fancy. Lots of big words and PowerPoints." I bet a few of the younger Rangers snickered. Thorne smiled, feeling the room align with him. "Well, out here, we deal in asymmetry of a different kind. The kind where a 220-pound man with bad intentions meets a 120-pound American warfighter, and the American still walks away. But looking at you, I'm not so sure." The insult was direct, public, and designed to humiliate. It was a power play, a way to establish his dominance over not just her, but the very concept of her presence. The room grew tense. The laughter died, replaced by an awkward silence. These were professionals, and while they respected Thorn's experience, this felt different. It felt unprofessional. Rostova, however, showed no reaction. No flush of anger, no flicker of fear. She simply tapped the screen of her data pad, saving her notes, and then carefully placed it on a nearby bench. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, each one a study in economy. She straightened her uniform blouse, a small, habitual gesture. This utter lack of emotional response seemed to infuriate Thorn more than any retort could have. "What's the matter, Sergeant Rostova? Cat got your tongue? Or do they not teach you how to respond to a verbal challenge in your asymmetric group?" He gestured to the center of the mats. "I'm Delta Force. You think you can teach me anything? Why don't you come out here and demonstrate for the class? Show us one of these high-speed techniques you're here to evaluate. Show us what a real operator looks like." It was a trap. If she refused, she was a coward. If she accepted and failed, she would be a fool. The trainees watched, their expressions a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. Rostova looked at Thorn, then at the waiting blue mat, and then back at Thorn. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but clear, cutting through the tension with surgical precision. "Understood, Staff Sergeant." The challenge hung in the air, thick and heavy. A collective, silent intake of breath seemed to pass through the assembled soldiers. They had expected a refusal, an excuse, a deferral to rank or regulation. They had not expected 2 words of calm, unequivocal acceptance. Staff Sergeant Thorn's smirk widened. This was better than he could have hoped for. He was going to dismantle her, not just physically, but reputationally, in front of 30 of the most elite soldiers on the base. He turned to one of the equipment cages. "Give me the red man's suit," he commanded. "The works. I don't want our guest to feel like I'm holding back." 2 younger NCOs scrambled to obey, pulling out the bulky, crimson-padded armor designed for full contact, simulated combat. The suit was a symbol. It was used to train soldiers how to deliver overwhelming, disabling force against an uncooperative subject. By donning it, Thorn was casting himself as the aggressor, the unstoppable force, and her as the one who had to react to survive. As he was being strapped into the helmet, the chest protector, and the massive padded gloves, he continued his monologue, his voice muffled but his arrogance undiminished. The key to CQC, he lectured, his words directed at the trainees but intended for Rostova, is violence of action. It's about overwhelming your opponent's ODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act. You have to move faster than they can think. You disrupt their balance. You disrupt their breathing. You disrupt their consciousness. It's physics, but it's angry physics. He stepped onto the mat, a hulking crimson behemoth, and bounced on the balls of his feet. He looked like a predator. He cracked his neck loudly to the left, then the right, a piece of pure theater. "All right, Sergeant Rostova. The floor is yours. No need to be shy. Come at me." Rostova, in stark contrast, did nothing theatrical. She simply walked to the center of the mat. She didn't stretch. She didn't shadow box. She didn't even adopt a conventional fighting stance. She simply stood there. But up in the gallery, Colonel Sterling leaned even closer to the glass, his heart rate quickening. He saw it again, clearer this time. The way her feet were planted, not in a boxer's line or a wrestler's sprawl, but almost parallel, shoulder-width apart. Her knees were slightly bent, her hips low, her spine perfectly aligned. Her hands were open, relaxed, held loosely in front of her. It was a posture of absolute balance, of receptive calm. It was the core stance of Systema, the enigmatic and brutally effective Russian martial art developed for their highest-tier Spetsnaz units. An art form that emphasized breathing, relaxation, and redirecting an opponent's force against them. It was a system he had only ever read about in classified intelligence reports on foreign special forces capabilities. Who was this sergeant? Down on the mat, the narrator of this unfolding drama would later focus on the small details. The way Rostova's eyes weren't fixed on Thorn's, but seemed to be taking in his entire form at once. His shoulders, his hips, his feet. The almost imperceptible, rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. Her breathing slow and steady, a stark contrast to Thorn's loud, adrenaline-fueled exhalations. She was a picture of calm, a still point in the swirling vortex of Thorn's ego. He was a storm about to break. She was the unshakable rock it was about to crash against. The moment stretched into a taut, humming wire of anticipation. Thorn, encased in his red armor, was a caricature of aggression. He feinted left, a quick, jerky motion designed to elicit a flinch. Rostova didn't move a muscle. He feinted right. Nothing. Her stillness was an insult, a silent refutation of his entire philosophy of intimidation. His frustration finally boiled over. With a guttural roar meant to shatter her composure, Thorn lunged. It wasn't a technical move. It was a pure application of mass and velocity, a haymaker punch that began at his back foot, a freight train of a swing aimed at the side of her head. The trainees winced. Even with a helmet, a blow like that would rattle your teeth and send you sprawling. The air itself seemed to compress in the path of his padded glove. But the impact never came. In the split second that Thorn's attack traveled through space, Rostova moved. It wasn't a block. It wasn't a dodge. It was something else entirely. The narration of the event, as it would be told and retold in the barracks and chow halls for years to come, would slow this moment down to 1,000th of its actual speed. As Thorn's arm reached its apex, she didn't retreat. She took a single, small step forward and to the side, entering the arc of his swing, moving inside his power. Her left hand, open and relaxed just a moment before, came up. It didn't strike. It simply met his wrist, her fingers lightly wrapping around the joint. Simultaneously, her body pivoted from the hips, a smooth, fluid rotation. It was the movement of a matador, not a boxer. Thorn's forward momentum, immense and uncontrolled, had nowhere to go. He expected to hit a solid object. Instead, he found his own force being guided, redirected. His arm, now controlled by that deceptively gentle grip, was pulled slightly further and faster than he intended. His balance, already committed to the punch, was suddenly and catastrophically compromised. He pitched forward, a stumbling, clumsy giant. But Rostova's movement wasn't finished. As he stumbled past her, her right hand, which had been resting passively at her side, came up in a blur. It wasn't a punch or a chop. Her fingers, held together like a surgeon's tool, found a precise point on the side of his neck, just below the ear, a nexus of the vagus and glossopharyngeal nerves. She applied a short, sharp pulse of pressure. It was not a blow. It was a command sent directly to his nervous system. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. Thorn's entire body went limp. His legs buckled as if his strings had been cut. The roar in his throat died, replaced by a choked gasp. He crumpled to the mat in a heap of red padding, not unconscious, but completely, utterly neutralized. His eyes were wide with shock and confusion, his brain screaming commands that his body refused to obey. Rostova was now standing behind him. She still had control of his wrist, holding it in a simple, unbreakable lock. Her other hand rested lightly on the back of his neck. The entire sequence, from the start of Thorn's lunge to his collapse on the mat, had taken less than 2 seconds. She had not made a single sound. And now, in the aftermath, the only sound in the entire facility was the ragged, panicked rasp of Thorn's breathing. The 30 elite soldiers stood frozen, their mouths agape. The cocky smirks had vanished, replaced by expressions of pure, unadulterated awe. They had just witnessed a man who outweighed his opponent by 100 pounds of muscle, a man renowned for his physical prowess and aggression, be taken apart like a child's toy. He hadn't been defeated. He had been deconstructed. He had been solved like a complex mathematical equation, and it had been done in absolute, terrifying silence. Thorn, pinned to the mat by a force he couldn't comprehend, managed to whisper a single word, a question that hung in the deafening quiet. How? The silence that followed was a physical presence, more profound than any sound. It was the sound of 30 egos being simultaneously recalibrated. It was the sound of assumptions shattering like glass. Staff Sergeant Thorn lay on the mat, a collapsed monument to his own arrogance, the crimson of his suit a perfect symbol for his humiliation. Sergeant Rostova held her position for a beat longer, ensuring he was no longer a threat, then released his wrist and stepped back. She straightened her uniform blouse again, the same small, precise gesture as before, her face a mask of professional neutrality. She hadn't even broken a sweat. The spell was broken by the sound of a door opening and the firm, measured tread of boots descending the metal stairs from the observation gallery. Every eye snapped toward the sound. Colonel James Sterling walked onto the mat, his expression unreadable, but his presence radiating an authority that dwarfed Thorne's manufactured dominance. The trainees, as if on a single string, snapped to a rigid parade rest. The colonel ignored them. He ignored Thorne, who was now struggling to sit up, his movements clumsy and uncoordinated. He walked directly to Rostova, stopping 2 feet in front of her. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, searched hers, not with suspicion, but with a dawning, profound respect. "Sergeant," he said, his voice calm and level. Report. Rostova met his gaze. "Sergeant Rostova, sir. Assigned to Asymmetric Warfare Group for T&E of current Joint Service, CQC curriculum." It was the same answer she'd given Thorne, but in this context, it felt like a deliberate understatement. Sterling nodded slowly, a small, grim smile touching his lips. He had been right. That stance was no accident. He turned to his aide, a young captain who had followed him down from the gallery, his face pale with shock. "Captain, give me Sergeant Rostova's file. Access level Omega." The captain's eyes widened. "Sir, Omega clearance requires 2-factor authorization from CENTCOM, and I am aware of the requirements." "Captain," Sterling cut him off, his voice dropping a degree in temperature. "My authorization is Sterling Alpha Niner. The secondary is on my authority as Deputy Commander, Joint Special Operations Task Force. Get it done." Now, the captain fumbled for his secure data pad, his fingers suddenly clumsy. The mention of the task force designation sent another shock wave through the room. This was no longer a simple training evaluation. This was something else entirely. As the captain worked, Sterling turned his attention back to Rostova. "You move well, Sergeant," he said, the words a massive understatement. "Your technique is clean. Very efficient, thank you, sir," she replied, her voice still a quiet monotone. "I practice." The captain finally looked up from his datapad, his face ashen. "Sir, I have it. But, sir, this file is..." Sterling held out his hand. "Read it to me, Captain. The relevant sections. Let's clear up some of the confusion." In this room, the captain swallowed hard and began to read, his voice trembling slightly. "Name, Rostova Eva. Rank, Sergeant First Class." A murmur went through the room. She was an E7, a senior NCO, outranking Thorne. She had never corrected him. Current assignment: Special Operator, 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. The room fell into a silence, so complete it felt like a vacuum. Delta Force. The pinnacle. The unit Thorne had so arrogantly claimed as his own spiritual kin. The captain continued, his voice barely a whisper. On loan to Asymmetric Warfare Group for Doctrine Development. Prior unit: Regimental Reconnaissance Company, 75th Ranger Regiment. Thorne's head snapped up, his face a mask of disbelief. She had served in the elite recon element of his own parent regiment. Special qualifications: Master Instructor, Systema. Expert, Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Graduate, Seer Level C. Graduate, Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat Course. The list went on, a litany of the most demanding and respected schools in the entire U.S. military. Each one was a testament to years of pain, discipline, and sacrifice. Awards and decorations include Silver Star. The captain paused, his voice cracking. Silver Star, sir. For actions in Redacted. Bronze Star with V device, 3 awards. Purple Heart. The file was a ghost story, the biography of a warrior who had walked through fire and emerged on the other side, silent and forged of steel. She wasn't just an operator. She was a legend, hidden in plain sight. The revelation hung in the air, a tangible thing. The name Delta Force, spoken by the captain, wasn't a boast. It was a simple, devastating fact from an official record. Sergeant First Class Eva Rostova, the quiet woman Thorne had tried to humiliate, was a member of the most elite, most secretive, and most lethal direct action unit in the United States military. She wasn't just in the club Thorne aspired to. She was on its board of directors. She had outranked him. She had outqualified him. And she had allowed him to build his own scaffold and walk himself to the gallows of his own arrogance without offering a single word of protest. The humility of her silence was now revealed as the most profound statement of confidence imaginable. Colonel Sterling let the weight of the facts settle over the room for a long moment. He watched the stunned faces of the trainees, the dawning horror on Thorne's face. Then he did something no one in the room had ever seen a full-bird colonel do for an enlisted soldier outside of a medal ceremony. He squared his shoulders, brought his heels together with an audible click, and rendered a slow, perfect formal salute. It was a gesture of immense, unequivocal respect. A salute from a commander to a proven warrior, a peer in the deadly craft they both served. "Sergeant Rostova," he said, his voice resonating with authority and sincerity. "My apologies. My profound apologies for the unacceptable lack of professional courtesy you have been shown by a member of my command. It is an honor to have you here. Your reputation, it seems, is far quieter than your service record." Rostova returned the salute with a crisp, economical motion. "No apology necessary, sir." Staff Sergeant Thorne was creating a realistic training scenario based on an overconfident adversary. "The data is useful." The response was brilliant in its magnanimity. She didn't just forgive the insult. She recontextualized it as a valuable data point, stripping Thorne of his malice and leaving him with only his foolishness. She had taken his attempt at humiliation and filed it away as a professional observation. The blow was more devastating than any physical strike. Colonel Sterling held her gaze for a moment, a look of deep appreciation in his eyes. Then he turned, and the warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by glacial ice. His eyes fell upon Staff Sergeant Thorne, who had finally managed to get to his feet and was standing awkwardly, the red man's suit now looking like a clown's costume. "Staff Sergeant Thorne." Sterling's voice was low, but it cut through the room like a razor. "You were the scroll of the 75th Ranger Regiment. You invoked the name of the 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment. You did this to puff up your chest and intimidate a fellow soldier you judged by her size and gender." He took a step closer, his voice dropping even lower, forcing everyone to lean in. "Those organizations, the ones you use as a shield for your ego, were built by men and women whose competence was their only credential. They earned their respect in blood and sacrifice, not by shouting in a gymnasium. They are quiet professionals, a concept you have clearly, disastrously, failed to grasp." He pointed a rigid finger at Thorne. "You did not just disrespect a sergeant first class and a master of your own craft. You disrespected every operator who earned their place through skill, not volume. You disrespected the memory of every quiet professional who ever put their life on the line without needing a parade. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear and the lineage you claim. The public dressing down was brutal, methodical, and utterly deserved." Thorne stood, his head bowed, his face crimson with a shame far deeper than the color of his suit. "You will remove that suit," Sterling commanded. "You will draft a formal, written apology to Sergeant First Class Rostova, and then you will report to the Sergeant Major. He and I will be redesigning your immediate future, which will include a great deal of remedial instruction on the core values of the non-commissioned officer corps. Is that understood?" "Yes, Colonel," Thorne mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Louder," Sterling roared, the sudden explosion of sound making everyone flinch. "Yes, Colonel," Thorne shouted, his voice cracking with humiliation. "Dismissed," Sterling said, turning his back on him in a final, damning gesture. He then addressed the stunned trainees. "Let this be a lesson for every single one of you. Your assumptions are your biggest liability. The most dangerous person in the room is often the one you don't see. Train hard, stay humble, or you will be humbled. The story of what happened on Mat 4 of the Joint Operations Combatives Facility spread with the speed of light, a digital wildfire jumping from secure text messages to whispered conversations in chow hall lines to late-night bull sessions in the barracks. It became folklore almost instantly. In the hypermasculine, reputation-based ecosystem of special operations, an event of such profound, symbolic power was more potent than any official memo. The narrative, as it was passed along, quickly took on the smooth, polished quality of a myth. They didn't say Thorne was neutralized. They said she switched him off. They didn't say she used a nerve strike. They said she borrowed his strength and gave it back to him. Some of the more fanciful versions claimed she never even touched him, that she simply breathed out and he collapsed. The details warped and shifted with each telling, but the core elements remained immutable. The loudmouth gatekeeper, the quiet professional, the silent demonstration, and the stunning reveal. The incident became a new cultural touchstone on the base, a cautionary tale for the arrogant and an inspiration for the diligent. Staff Sergeant Thorne became a ghost, a walking symbol of his own public failure. He followed his orders. He wrote the apology, a stilted, formal document that Rostova accepted with a simple, non-judgmental nod. He reported to the command sergeant major, a man whose leathery face was a roadmap of forgotten conflicts and who possessed a near-mythical talent for creative, soul-crushing corrective training. Thorne's redesigned future involved him being reassigned from his prestigious lead instructor role to overseeing inventory and maintenance for the very training facility where he had been humbled. He spent his days counting padded suits, checking the integrity of training weapons, and mopping the very mats where his pride had been so utterly dismantled. But the punishment was more than just punitive. It was transformative. The humiliation burned away the dross of his arrogance, leaving behind the core of the good soldier he once was. Other NCOs, who would have once joined in his mockery, now gave him a wide berth. He was isolated, forced to confront the architecture of his own failure. He was seen late at night in the base library, not reading field manuals on tactics, but leadership books, biographies of men like General Mattis and Colonel Hal Moore, men whose strength was rooted in intellect and humility. Weeks later, during a basic training session for new recruits, a young soldier was struggling, clumsy, and frustrated. The old Thorne would have barked an insult. The new Thorne watched for a moment, then walked over, knelt down, and quietly, patiently, adjusted the young man's stance. "Don't fight the weight," he said softly. "Redirect it. Use its own momentum. Less muscle, more geometry." It was the beginning of his redemption. The lesson Rostova had taught him in 2 seconds, he would now spend a career teaching others. Meanwhile, Sergeant First Class Rostova's life changed very little on the surface, which was, in itself, the most powerful part of the legend. She did not swagger. She did not leverage her newfound fame for a better assignment. She simply continued her work. She finished her evaluation of the CQC curriculum, her report concise, insightful, and utterly professional. It contained a new annex, Section 34B, titled Psychological Dominance versus Technical Proficiency, which used the data from her realistic training scenario with an unnamed, overconfident adversary to recommend changes to instructor selection and training. She became an object of immense curiosity and respect. Trainees would fall silent when she entered a room. People made way for her in the hallways. A small group of female soldiers from various units, who had long endured the casual condescension of their male peers, began to see her as a symbol of something they had desperately needed: proof. Proof that competence was genderless. Proof that strength came in more forms than just brute force. One of them, a young sergeant from a military police unit, finally worked up the courage to approach Rostova in the gym. "Sergeant First Class Rostova," she began nervously. "I was there, at the combatives hall. We just wanted to ask, how?" Rostova was in the middle of a complex stretching routine, her body moving with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the normal limits of anatomy. She paused and looked at the young NCO. She didn't offer a war story or a boast. "It's not a secret," Rostova said, her voice calm and even. "It's a principle. Your opponent gives you everything you need to defeat them. Their anger, their momentum, their aggression. You don't have to generate any force. You just have to listen to what they're giving you and guide it to its logical conclusion." She then invited the young sergeant and the two friends with her to join her. She didn't run a formal class. She simply shared her philosophy. She taught them how to breathe from their diaphragm to stay calm under pressure. She taught them how to move from their center to maintain balance. She taught them that the most powerful weapon they had was not their fists, but their mind's ability to remain still and observant in the middle of a storm. Her mentoring sessions became a quiet, unofficial institution, a small island of profound wisdom. The symbolic artifact of the event was subtle but permanent. No plaque was ever made. No official commendation was given. But the instructors at the combatives facility, starting with the newly humbled Staff Sergeant Thorne, began referring to the spot where he fell as the Rostova line. It became a teaching tool. On the first day of every new course, the lead instructor would have the class gather around that section of the blue mat. "This is the Rostova line," they would say. "It marks the exact point where arrogance collided with competence. On this side of the line is your ego, your assumptions, your mouth. On that side is the mission, your discipline, and your skill. Your job is to learn which side to live on. Because a ghost once taught a giant how to be humble right here, and you will never see her coming." A year passed. The seasons on the sprawling desert base turned from scorching summer to a mild, dusty winter and back again. The story of Rostova and Thorne had completed its evolution from gossip to legend to accepted institutional doctrine. It was now a standard part of the curriculum at the base's NCO Leadership Academy. Colonel James Sterling, now a brigadier general selectee, stood at a podium before a new class of freshly promoted sergeants, the future backbone of the Army. His speech was on the changing nature of modern warfare, but he chose to open it with a story. "I want to tell you about two sergeants," he began, his voice commanding the auditorium's full attention. "One was a man built like a machine of war, a veteran of countless raids, an expert in violence of action. The other was a woman, quiet, unassuming, who you would likely walk past without a second glance. The big sergeant saw the small one and saw a target for his ego. He judged her by the cover, not the content. He was loud. She was silent. He challenged her in a room full of her peers, intending to make an example of her. Sterling paused, letting the dramatic tension build. And she did become an example, but not the one he intended. In less time than it takes to draw a breath, she used his own aggression, his own momentum, and his own arrogance to dismantle him completely. She did it without raising her voice, without breaking a sweat, and without an ounce of malice. She simply demonstrated a superior level of professional competence. He was a warrior. She was a master of the art of war. The room was silent, the young NCOs leaning forward, captivated. "The man's name is not important," Sterling continued. "His lesson is." The woman's name was Sergeant First Class Eva Rostova, a quiet professional of the highest caliber. I tell you this story not to celebrate one soldier over another, but to impress upon you the single most important lesson you will learn as a leader. True strength is quiet. True competence does not need to advertise. Your respect as leaders will not be granted by the volume of your voice, but by the depth of your character and the undisputed quality of your skills. In a world of noise, learn the power of silence. In a world of ego, learn the value of humility. His words resonated with the force of a formal order. The story was no longer about a single event, but about a timeless principle. The Rostova line on Map 4 was now a required stop for all new instructors, a place to reflect on the dangers of assumption. New soldiers arriving at the base were told the story as a way to understand its culture, a culture that, since that day, placed a higher premium on quiet excellence. Staff Sergeant Thorne, for his part, had completed his penance. He had been quietly reassigned to a Ranger training battalion at Fort Benning. The reports that came back to Sterling were of a different man, a stern, demanding, but scrupulously fair instructor, known for his patience and his mantra, which he repeated to every new ranger candidate. Your ego is not your friend. Your assumptions are not your weapon. Your discipline is your only shield. The legacy of that day was not a photograph pinned to a bulletin board or a name etched onto a plaque. It was a change in the air, a recalibration of values that rippled outward in 1,000 small ways. It was in the way a seasoned master sergeant would now listen, truly listen, to a suggestion from a junior specialist. It was in the way female soldiers felt a new measure of implicit respect, a sense of belonging earned not by concession, but by the shattering precedent Rostova had set. It was in the understanding that the modern battlefield required more than just physical strength. It required intellectual agility, emotional discipline, and a profound humility in the face of the unknown. Sergeant First Class Rostova herself was long gone, reassigned to another classified role in another part of the world, a ghost moving through the shadows of global conflict. She left behind no forwarding address, only a standard. Her silence had been a vessel, filled to the brim with years of relentless training, pain, and discipline. Thorne's shouting had been an empty barrel, loud and resonant, but ultimately hollow. She proved that true power isn't the ability to shout down your critics, but the quiet, unshakable confidence that your actions will speak for you in the end. Her legacy wasn't in the single, perfect takedown of an arrogant NCO. It was in the thousands of future interactions that would be shaped by its lesson. It was in the new generation of leaders who would learn to look past the surface, to value substance over style, and to understand that the most formidable warriors are often the ones who have nothing to prove. They're the quiet professionals, the steady hands, the calm hearts in the center of the storm. They don't seek validation because their competence is its own reward. They don't demand respect because their actions command it. Eva Rostova didn't just neutralize an opponent that day. She realigned a culture around a more noble and effective center of gravity, proving that the loudest voice in the room is rarely the strongest, and that a legacy is not what you claim, but what you prove. True worth is forged in the silent crucible of discipline, and it is demonstrated not with words, but with calm, undeniable, and devastating competence. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent discipline defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.